It's turned on now.
Good, okay.
You either run down what happened past.
Okay, we're almost
So now we're
ready
gonna
to
have
go.
5 recordings.
Still have them all going.
I'm gonna do mine. I was planning to do mine anyway as a backup, just in case the battery went out or something.
Do you know how to upload the recordings to the website?
No, I'll figure it out.
There's some set of procedures.
It's just YouTube.
I'm sure it's pretty straightforward. Do you wanna get us started?
Wait
Yeah,
for Bill.
just
Wait
about
for Bill.
ready. Okay, we're all here? Okay, 7:30. Welcome to the first meeting of the new fiscal year. We have several new faces here. First, Tori Hall, who is our new village manager, and 2 council members, one old face, and Richard Krajcik, and one new face, Katja Hill, who actually we've been seeing sitting there for many meetings now. And welcome to this side of the table.
Thank you.
To begin with, we have our police officers who have used up their time to come in here tonight to talk to us about what's been going on. So who wants to start off?
So Mike, Sergeant Pratt's got everything up until like 2 days ago.
Yeah.
And then I just got the phone with the guy in charge of the Deptford Auto Detail going on. So
Okay.
I can update the last like 48 hours.
Good, okay, great, thank you.
I'm working for the county now, so I'm representing them. Again, my name's Mike. I'm just going to stand there. My name's Mike Pratt, for those of you that I haven't met. I am the evening supervisor for one of the shifts over here in Bethesda. I've worked in and around here for almost 13 years of being an officer here. Obviously, everybody's aware of the crime trend that Bethesda has had, and that's theft from autos. Montgomery County, 38% of all of our larcenies that occur in the entire county are from automobiles. In Bethesda here alone, it accounts for almost 3/4 of all of the larcenies that we have. And just so you guys get a feel for when I say Bethesda. So Bethesda District's 56 square miles. There's 200,000 residents that live here. That doesn't include the influx of people that travel through the district to read everything. If you can picture all the way out in Potomac Falls and River, Piney Meeting House, all the way there, MacArthur all the way down to Western over to 16th, all the way up to basically Randolph all the way back over to Montrose, a pretty big box. On any given night as a supervisor, I have 8 officers that cover that area. The average officer to ratio in the country is something like 3.5 per 10,000 people. So obviously if we have 200,000 on the low end and there's only 8, we're well below that, but that's what we have to work with. And saying that and working down here long enough, I think we do a good job with it. I'm going to throw out some stats for you specifically for the village here. We have a crime analyst that's dedicated just to Bethesda. So there's a civilian that pulls every single report of crime, and they compile this stuff. His name is Cliff Burrell. He does his job very well. The village here, January 1st, 2015 through 7/13 of 2015. Mind you, these are reported crimes, and it's going to bring up a topic that I need to discuss. We've had 5 reported theft from autos here in the 7.5 months that this covers. All of them were no force, car doors were unlocked, and things taken were changed, iPods, iPads, stuff like that, small electronics. We had a theft from the sidewalk of a business down here. One of the signs from next door was stolen. Obviously, everybody was aware of the anti-Semitic flyers that were distributed. One of the big things I found from our records division is that in that same time period, there were 281 generated calls for service in the village of Martin's Addition, meaning that 281 different times, not necessarily village residents, but there were calls in and around here, whether it was alarms, whether it was accidents, whatever. They could have been domestics, it could have just been anything. But in the span of 7.5 months, we've had to at least, receive the call 281 times for calls here in the village alone, which is, it's a pretty big number, but when you compare it to everywhere else, it's low. But just so you know, that's the type of call volume that even just a small little nook of Bethesda can generate for us as police. One of the big things that obviously we're here for is to talk about theft from autos. In the district alone, the past 45 days, theft from autos have risen 60% here. Nick is going to discuss a little bit about what's been going on in the past few weeks with the amount of lockups that the police department here has made and everything like that. But a lot of citizens will email Captain Falsnell. If you don't know him, he's in charge of the Bethesda district. He's a very great leader that we have, and I'm happy to work for him. So he will personally respond to emails. And I don't know if any of you have ever sent him. He does this. And one of the emails that we got last night that was forwarded to him, I wanted to I cut out a little blip of it just so everybody's aware sort of what his mentality is. And he went over the size of it and everything. This is from him. We average per month approximately 3 robberies, 15 burglaries, 5 stolen autos, and 50 theft from automobiles. Most of the suspects that we find and encounter from DC ride bikes into our neighborhoods or take public transportation. One of the things I ask, and again this is from the captain, is of residents to be our eyes and ears and call us when they see suspicious people such as young people on bikes with backpacks in the very early morning hours trying car door handles. I cannot tell you how frustrating it is for us when someone tells us the following day that they saw suspicious people around vehicles but they didn't want to waste our time or theirs. And real big in capital letters, please call us and let us do our job. And then everybody's aware of the non-emergency number. One of the things that I'm sure Nick will caught on, but he is very big on, is responding to crime trends like this. Now, granted, the big thing I wanted to bring up was 5 reported theft from autos in 7 months. I know that that's not correct, because we had 5 in one day, but it's reported. And when Tori sent me the email, the very first thing I said was, you got to report it. Because unfortunately, everybody in this room knows it, but when the chief and the captain don't know what's going on over here, why in the world would they send their troops over here whenever you got places like Westmoreland Circle, and heck, even the Village? 20 theft from autos and 2 stolen cars in one night, over there. But then they look at us over here, and when I say us, obviously the Village, 5 in 7 months. So that's the big thing that I really want to hammer home is you got to call. My MCP News, you could do it online. If you don't want to do it right there, go to work. Do it online. Everybody has it. All you need is a valid email address. Call our non-emergency number. You could do it over the phone. But that's the big problem that we face is underreporting. So for every 5, I'm sure there's 5 or 10 that go not reported. So that's the big thing that I really want to hammer home. Nick's going to talk a little bit about, and I'm sure he'll touch on what he's going to discuss, what's been going on the past few days.
Thank you.
All right, everyone doesn't know me. I am Nick Pacerno. I am the sergeant in charge of our police reconstruction unit. I'm going to sit down here with the mic because I feel like I'm like learning over everybody. Too tall. So, I got off the phone on my drive over here with Sergeant Jensen. He's in charge of the 2nd District Community Action Team. So every district in the county has what's called the District Community Action Team. And then centralized at an SOD, there's something called PCAT, which is the Police Community Action Team. So Mike and I worked together before. Sergeant Jensen is in charge of the 2nd District's local team. He's in charge of handling the crime trend that's kind of popped up over the last, I guess, 6 weeks, district-wide. And what he told me they did was they have, over the last week, detailed their DCAT, so the 6 officers of DCAT, centralized PCAT, which is another, I think, 8 officers, plus their special assignment team, which is plainclothes surveillance teams, just to work the theft from auto issue. For a bit of comparison, we had 5, like Sergeant Pratt said, we had 5 theft from autos in the Village of Martins Edition over the last 7 months. In the last 3 nights, the neighborhood south of Bradley Boulevard, it's called Chevy Chase West, had 50 in a 3-day stretch. They stole so much stuff that they had to steal vehicles to get the stuff back. And the ironic thing, and that's going to go to something that Mike has kind of touched on. 2 most important things I could say is, one, like Sergeant Mike said, if you see something suspicious, call. Let the responding officer decide whether or not it was benign or whether it's legitimate. If you wait till the next day to call, you're 12 hours too late. If you wait an hour to call, you're an hour too late. They made an arrest. So relating to those 50 theft from autos a couple days ago, this is what Warren told me on the phone. Last night they made an arrest. A citizen saw some dude acting suspicious in their front yard, called the police. Surveillance team set up. They watched a couple of guys commit a theft. They pulled him over in a stolen car, and they recovered a bunch of stolen property solely because somebody called the police when they saw something suspicious. So you're not being a pain. You're not being inconvenient to us. We would much rather respond to that call and make an arrest than write the 20 theft from autos the next day. But what we did learn, and what we are seeing though, is a couple trends. One, unlocked vehicles. I know, and this is something Mike and I touched on about a year ago, but it's very good to refresh our memory on this. I am willing to bet that 99.99% of every one of these theft from autos is from an unlocked car. You may think you locked your car door, you didn't lock your car door. A neighborhood such as this, what people will do is they will drop off a group of, like, Mike can talk this because he did this kind of work in surveillance before, 5 or 6 guys at the end of the neighborhood. They will walk down a street, they will try every car door, they will open the ones that are unlocked, they'll go and take what they can and keep going. They're not going to stop to break out a window, they're not going to stop to slam in the door because it takes time. They're not going to stand there while someone can look out their window and see them. They want to be quick, they want to be fast, take what they can, they want to move. The stolen cars that were taken were stolen because the keys to them were inside the vehicle.
Oh my God.
Or they were being extra clever and put the keys to their spouse's car inside their car, saying, well, I didn't leave my keys in the car, it's my husband's car. Yeah, but your husband's car is parked next to it, and the key says Land Rover on it. It's a Land Rover parked next to your car. So, in all those 3 theft from autos were all keys that were in the center console of a car parked in the driveway as well. So I can't stress enough the fact you lock your doors, don't leave keys in the car. If you put your GPS away and you put your Easy Pass away, I can't promise you you'll be fine, but I would be 1,000 times more confident that you're going to be fine by simply taking those 2 steps. The other thing they're noticing with some of the thefts that are happening is, especially here, we live walking distance from a metro station, but what criminals are doing is they're stealing bikes lately. It's been a kind of rising crime trend, taking bikes from sheds and from front porches that are not secure. So if you have a bike, just lock it away. I can say that they have put a ton of resources in. Warren told me he hasn't slept in 3 days because of the arrest. They made 6 arrests in the last week and a half. They don't have any numbers yet from this most recent arrest. They're pretty confident that this most recent one are guys who are doing a lot of the thefts. I'm assuming they're guys. They didn't say specifically, but that are doing the thefts. But it happened in the last night. There's no numbers to support if the thefts are going to drop or increase. It's certainly not just one group of people doing it. But like Mike said, I'm sure 5 is an underreported number. But even if it's 5 times that, and it's 25 over a 7-month stretch, it would still be the lowest of any of the surrounding neighborhoods. I think Chevy Chase, the Village, had upwards of, I think, 30 over the last 6 weeks. And like I said, there was neighborhoods in what we call Edward 1, but it's in the beat that's across Wisconsin Avenue that in a 3 or 4 day stretch had 50. So I know it doesn't make you feel any better if you're the one whose car they went into, but comparatively speaking, we're doing a pretty good job here. But like I can say, just can't stress enough the fact to lock your doors, keep stuff hidden. A little bit of proactivity will go a huge way in keeping your house and your property a little safer. That cover everything?
One of the things we found in interviewing these gentlemen is I always ask, why'd you show up in the Village? Why'd you show up in Chevy Chase? And I've said this before. Every criminal knows where it's at. The one guy quoted it perfectly, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but he basically said, people in Bethesda treat iPads, phones, iPods, and cell phones like they're pennies that we would leave on the floorboard. Like that's the mentality that they think that people in Bethesda have. And so why would you not? The guys that stole the car over there off of Morgan or Worthington, they got caught on the way down to D.C. in that stolen car. And when they were interviewed, they said that we would catch the metro, walk into neighborhoods for a little bit. We got tired of walking, so we stole 2 bikes. And then we got to the streets that were just like Turner, just like Shepherd, lined with cars, and the foliage is over the lights, and everybody's lights are practically off. And they would just start trying doors. And once they got loaded up with stuff, wow, there's a car key there. The big thing is the fobs, too. Everybody has the fobs. They leave the fob in the car. And you just get in, press the brake, and go. So that's the proactivity on the part of everybody here is really what we need. I will say that, not speaking from me, from the county, but when Nick and I work, like the other night, whenever I see these crime trends, and that's kind of why I like to, the fact that I work over here and I could see the stuff happening, prior to us getting hit over here, I was able to work my overnight hours. 90% of my hours are after 8 and 9 o'clock because I could see the trends. But when I see stuff like that happening, I can grab 2 officers that I know were either detailed somewhere else. And I don't know if anybody sees 3 officers walking through the neighborhoods in full uniform. You aren't going to get that anywhere else. But that's some of the stuff that Nick and I are able to do and coordinate. And even if it's only for 5 hours a week for each of us, that's just some of the little stuff that we try to do, because obviously we put a lot of time and effort into this. Whether I'm working for the county or not, I love this place here, and you guys have a great place. And I hate the fact that when somebody's car gets broken into, it's $4 and change, and they might say, I don't want to lock my doors because I want to live in a place where I don't have to. You know, that's great. I love that, and I wish that every place in America were like that. But we just got to be a little bit more proactive with what we do. Okay? So.
But quick, you mentioned lights. That the foliage is covering some of the street lights, and do you like to see the lights on in front of houses?
Again, my 3 L's that I made up.
Right.
Lights, locks, and loud noises they will avoid. And
Right.
it's not necessarily the street. I don't expect, Brookville Road lights. And
Yeah.
what you guys have is ample. Some of the foliage might be, but it's people's lights on their homes.
On their homes.
There was a study that said it costs like $11 to run one light every night of the year. $11 to keep somebody from breaking into your car or coming up on your porch. We just got calls where guys are going up on the porch. The other night, when I was here with the plainclothes guys, Officer Jensen's DCAT team was here. They were on bikes. I don't know if anybody's seen them in their cool shorts. They're on bikes. They literally rode up to me, and I was trying to explain what areas of the village were hit. And right here on Florida Street, the call goes out for the 2 guys that are on the gentleman's porch. That's what it is. They were there in a rented car from D.C., never been here before. That's what we're here for, but it was a citizen calling. We're here. It's very difficult unless you're on a surveillance team to find people in the act of doing it. And when each district only has 6 officers that are in covert vehicles, it's a big area to cover. So you guys are eyes and ears.
56.
90% of our lockups come from it. And even though the stat isn't true, 92% of theft from autos are from unlocked doors. And in my opinion, the other 8% are people that just didn't know if they were locked. So it's when we find the smashed windows, they're normally in parking garages or large commercial lots where nobody's going to hear that at the Marriott Center or wherever. So again, I'm happy that even if on a conservative, say we've only had 15 theft from autos or 20, and I know we had a couple bikes taken, which is probably the same thing. They yanked the bikes off I think it was on Cummings. Yanked a couple bikes off of the porch. And they probably rode around and were looking for stuff to do. But it's low. I'd love to see it at 0.
Right.
Okay, and I think everybody in here would. Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
When you said to make a call immediately if you saw something suspicious, would you call it an emergency?
301-279-8000. If it's just you want to report somebody that, hey, this guy's, it's midnight. You know who's in and out of your neighborhood at night. And even if you aren't up late at night, you still know who belongs there, who has reasonable purpose, to be there. So yeah, non-emergency numbers. If it's an emergency, obviously 911.
Right.
Chris, if you lose the paper, if you Google the non-emergency, it pops up.
It'll pop
And
right.
I think we actually have it in the directory.
Any other council members? Anyone else? Other questions, comments? Yeah. Identify yourself.
Oh, Steve Schmall, Summit Ave. I've long had that belief that when the in quotes break-ins were occurring, that they were almost always people who failed to lock their cars. The most recent spate of unreported, and I'm not happy that they weren't reported, break-ins, there seemed to be more of an indication, at least that the people felt, some of them quite strongly, that they had locked their cars. Is there anything that's going on in terms of technology that might support that?
I've heard of, not in Montgomery County, every once in a while we get information from different law enforcement, Las Vegas, you name it. I have seen universal clickers that for certain types of vehicles, much like a garage door, every car has the frequency and the chip.
Yeah.
That sometimes, and it would have to be, in my opinion, an inside job. I buy a Land Rover or something, and the guy that gives it to me at the dealership, he knows my chip identification thing, and he makes his own. We have seen stuff like that. You could YouTube videos where a guy in New York walks down the street like this, and and he'll pop 3 or 4 doors open with that. That stuff could be out there. As far as it being down here and the people we catch doing this,
No.
more than likely not. But again, I'm not going to say it doesn't, and it can. Usually when we say no force, it's no windows are broken, there's no Slim Jim marks, and all the newer cars, they're so impossible. I mean,
Yeah.
I try to do it all the time, to pop doors with the new cars, electronic locks. It's very difficult, so.
It's interesting. Yeah, I have a question. There has been a suggestion raised by some residents that because we are paying you guys to do patrol, that the county is doing less, so that we don't end up with any net gain. From what you described about the 56 square miles and the amount of resources that's available to spread around that, I would imagine we're not getting regular patrols through here in any event. But could you address that?
Yeah, so
issue?
when I worked down here in Bethesda as a normal police officer, this is what we call the Delta 1 area. If you can picture Connecticut all the way over to 16th, that's sort of, and then east-west is the border, a big square.
We both worked here as yes.
That's very true.
Yeah.
We would, specifically for the village and stuff, we would do active patrols, but they would be very sporadic. It wouldn't be like, hey, I didn't drive through the village tonight, I need to. A lot of it is going to calls. A lot of it is answering calls for service. And I remember when we first got hired here, Gene had a big conversation with Captain Falsnell, and she mentioned that she loved him. And I said, why? And he goes, because he's not going to blow smoke up my butt. I requested all of this, much what we were just talking about, some extra patrol, surveillance, and he flat out said exactly what you said. Listen, I apologize. You have an awesome neighborhood there. I cannot say that I'm going to send my officers over there to specifically do that. We do it, but it's not at the captain's thing. But again, that's what I can do too, as a sergeant. I argue that everybody knows that because we are here and you guys like the police and you hire the police, that in a way you almost get more patrols and you almost get more people sitting down at the end of Turner or here writing reports and stuff. It's sort of like, not an unspoken rule, but you know when a call goes out and it's in an area that hires police officers, they get more attention because we want to keep police officers with their jobs, and so that's sort of like the collection down there, Rodeo Drive we call it. They used to have police officers 24/7. They have them there for 2 or 3 hours a day, and if anybody works for the land company, they know that. Crime has gone up down there, and at the same time, the amount of coverage that we can send down there is limited as well, so it's give and take. But to answer your question, no, absolutely not. They don't say, hey, Pratt and Pacerno over there, we
Right.
aren't going there.
Right.
And I think almost like Sergeant Pratt said, it's kind of the converse of that, because if somebody knows I'm working down here, they may be like, hey, Nick, what are you doing? Let's stop by and see you for a couple minutes. And they'll pop in and make sure, 'cause I haven't seen them in a while, just to chat. They have 2 officers sitting down here for 10 minutes.
Right.
Whereas otherwise you would have had 1.
Right.
So it almost is a force multiplier by having us here.
Good, thank you. Any other questions that come up? You're not going to get this opportunity all the time.
Thank
Okay. Good. Okay, well,
We
thanks for
appreciate
coming
it.
by.
Thanks.
Good, thank you. I think we know, lock your front doors, lock your car doors, keep your lights on.
Perfect.
Thanks.
And make loud noises.
And make,
Hopefully they will make loud noises.
right, thanks.
On the road.
No need for you to hang around.
I'm going to grab like 5-10 more minutes.
Okay. We are now moving into an annual event, the election of officers for Martin's Additions. So let us start off by saying, do we have any nominations for officers?
I nominate Arthur.
As?
Oh, the chair,
For-
sorry.
Okay, thank you.
I nominate Richard for chair.
Okay, any other nominations for chair? Let's start off with that. Any other nominations? Okay, let's vote. For Richard.
Do we need a second?
Oh, do we have to second that?
Yeah.
Do we have to second those things?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
a motion like any other motion.
Okay,
Motion to elect Arthur
okay.
as chair.
I'll second
or
your motion.
Richard.
Okay,
And do you have a second for Richard?
I'll second. But we have to do one at a time, right? Okay.
Okay. Okay,
Yes.
okay. Do we have a votes for Richard?
Aye.
Okay. Votes for the chairman, present chairman?
Well,
Okay.
finish
What?
this motion.
What?
So the motion is to elect.
Okay, we already taken the vote.
Yeah.
We're running ahead.
Well, it's-
So what?
It's. Is
So
it
Patrick-
3-2 for Richard or
Yes.
is it 3-0-2?
3-2.
Okay.
And with that, there is a tradition of the handing over of the gavel that has been almost ageless and has been carried on. So we will hand over the gavel. Thank you.
So now we're vice chair.
And,
Sorry.
well, you can do a slate if you have a slate. You don't have to do them individually, however you would like to proceed.
Okay, nominations for vice chair.
I nominate Arthur for vice chair.
Is there a second?
I second.
Are there any other nominations? Okay, all those in favor of Arthur as vice chair?
Aye.
Uh,
Sorry, okay.
It's 5-0.
So then nominations for secretary.
We should say that Bill is currently the secretary.
Okay.
I nominate Bill as continuing secretary.
Any other nominations? Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay.
A vote?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Treasurer,
Treasurer,
nominations?
I nominate our esteemed housing administrator here, Katya, as treasurer.
Second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
You don't have to learn Quicken or any of that. I will send you a lot of information that I have.
Thank you.
Okay. Good.
And he's available for consulting afterward.
Great.
And find out where we can get better CD rates.
Pardon?
This is your second time.
Oh, okay,
That's right.
yeah.
You want us to
You have to
nominate?
go
No, no,
beyond
that's fine.
three significant zeros till you get a significant
Residents, this
digit.
is that time of the meeting where we have residents' concerns, contributions. Does anyone have anything to say?
I'm flabbergasted. Nobody has anything to say tonight, okay? Okay, we do have.
No, I'll just congratulate the new members of the board.
Thank you.
And I'd like to thank Arthur for his work over the past couple of years, which has been not easy.
But fun.
Thank you, yeah. Okay, action on the minutes of June 18th, including
Executive session.
sessions. Those were all sent out, and so I think we can just have a motion to have them approved as they were presented.
There were some things that had to be filled in at a minimum.
Are they all-
Yeah.
Well, there are three separate minutes here. There's the minutes for the interim closed council meeting on the 10th, then the interim closed council meeting on the 16th, and then the minutes for the meeting on June 18th.
Okay.
Ron, do they require
Okay,
separate
and
action?
they're all filled in.
No.
They should all be part of the
Definitely.
regular
They're all
minutes.
filled in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is there another executive committee meeting that is not?
No, I think we're up to date.
There was three.
There were three.
And there's two in here.
And we had already done one, didn't we?
Oh, there is, the third one is,
It's included at the
Yeah.
bottom of,
it's
Oh,
on
I'm
page,
sorry.
page 7.
because it was the
Okay.
night after the meeting.
Got it. Okay. So is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
I've read them over, we've gone over them, I move that we approve as we have here.
Is there a second?
No second? What, you have a problem? Or, Bill?
No, I just wasn't here, so I
Oh,
don't want to
oh.
second it. I wasn't here for the meeting.
I'll second that. Per advice from council. I will
Okay.
second.
All in
Okay.
favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Discussion of the council's role in hiring employees in village management.
This is in tab 3, binders.
I think that the question has been whether the council has the authority to hire, or whether the village manager has the authority, or whether the council can, from time to time, decide whether or not the manager has the authority or the council wants the authority. Is that true, or is it
Yeah.
one or only?
It's my opinion that the council has the budgeting responsibility to decide how funds are expended. Therefore, if you're creating a new employment position, the council has to approve the expenditure. But you can, if you wish, delegate the responsibility of filling that position to the village manager.
So once it's in the budget, the council's approved it, and then we can decide whether or not we've delegated that, the hiring for that specific position to the manager.
Correct.
Can I phrase one of our former council members, John Fleming, who used the phrase, is it our job, and which he thought it was at the time, we hire the manager does the hiring of everybody else, whether it's police, assistant, or whatever. Or does the manager do it with review by the council? Or does the council take an active role in going over resumes, interviewing, and participate with the manager in the hiring? So I think that this has been the question about what role, to what degree does the council insert itself into these actions?
And is the goal that there is a single track that this is how it will be done, or can we have a track that says, well, under this circumstance, we would like the village manager to do the interviewing and just keep us informed? Or at another level, can we say, we'd like to participate in the interviews and be a part of the decision making? Does it have to be one or the other?
No, that's a policy decision, how much input you want in the process. And a third option would be to act on a recommendation from the manager after the manager has conducted all the interviews.
Right.
So there's many
Or
possibilities.
it might be the manager says, I really would like the council to be a part of these interviews.
Sure.
And was that a look of yes at that point? No, I'm kidding. No, it was.
I would think the only issue would be that we have a rationale for why we changed the rules. There just has to be some justification saying, well, this is a more important one, or it's a more difficult one, or something else. And therefore we're involved, and others we don't feel the need to be involved in. Sort of like maybe every time we do it, we just do a 1 sentence or 2 sentence
Right.
justification.
And I would say if it's not a black and white, that the conversations have to be had on the front end. Once we say we're going to budget for a certain amount so that the manager's expectations or any council member's expectations are very clear that
Right from the beginning.
this is what the goal is, and this is the person who has to manage the process. They're accountable for the outcomes as well. I think that getting that taken care of in the front end solves a lot of the confusion.
Are you saying it's going to be on a case-by-case basis? Is that
Yeah.
That's a
option?
that's a possibility.
Tori, how does that, I mean, you're,
So I'm just
part
asking
of
for
this.
clarification.
Well, that's
So
what
when
Richard's suggesting. and I
is
think-
the policy something that states this is going to be done on a case-by-case basis? Is that what's...
Well, yeah, as the materials point out, I think as Tiffany pointed out, the code and charter are a bit ambiguous. There's one section that says the council may employ those employees
employ.
it deems necessary.
Right.
However, the council is also empowered to assign such tasks as it deems appropriate to the village manager. So if, preferably, we would clean that up and then also have perhaps an SOP, a standing operating procedure document that states how we're going to proceed going forward with employment actions, and maybe you want to expand it to other contracts as well.
well, so that was the question I was going to ask you. I mean, this talks about employment, so we're talking about for the manager and assistant manager, which to me I think is something that
Well, I actually added a phrase there, and village management, which meant that we could also consider contracts and other activities.
but that's not covered in the village management is not covered in what we're dealing with cleaning up, right? Like, this does not deal with contracts.
It could. To what degree do we
Right,
delegate
the specific provisions that Tiffany's highlighted deal only
with
with
employment?
the manager, but you may nevertheless consider a more comprehensive policy, because how often are you actually going to hire a village manager or a
Assistant.
assistant manager, and maybe you don't need a policy just for that action. It could be a more global policy.
And how often really is anyone hired, right?
So
that
that's
obviously
the question,
happens.
rarely.
Tori,
But even like police officers, not just a village manager, just.
well, it's not even clear to me how the assistant village manager is so different from the contractual arrangements with like the police officers. Is it? I mean, they're not, the assistant village manager position doesn't have benefits. It's a year-to-year contract. It's for a set price and hours, so it seems to me kind of not a particularly different category than the other.
Well, it can be whatever the village desires. Historically, it was a part-time position with a rather bare-bones contract.
Can anyone come up with language that would attempt to clarify this? That in general, the manager is responsible with oversight. What does oversight mean?
Well, what is the, I have two things. One, I'd like to know your thoughts on this. And when the charter has some statements in it about contract and that they must be put out for bid if they're over a certain amount, but I don't know if there's anything that says what happens after that prescribed in the charter. I don't think
No,
so.
it doesn't.
So again, I'd like, Tori, you've been here for a month now. I guess it's just unclear to me if everything's going great, then it's not really an issue. There's the hiring, but then what if things don't go well? Who is firing authority? That's maybe more my question.
Good point.
And or who's managing during that time?
Right.
Correct. Who does the
Providing
annual
course
reviews?
corrections, yeah.
Who determines if there's going to be a raise or a bonus or a... Well, the raise or the bonus, I guess we could argue, has to be done in the budget if we're living on a budget year. You can allocate them an amount for a raise, but that doesn't necessarily mean you would award it.
Right.
And we would have to have the discussion ahead of time about allocating an amount for a raise, which I don't know if that's been a part of the budget discussions in the past.
It has, yeah. And I would say that what's happened in the past is, in the budget at least, when I was working on the budget, was that there generally was a discussion at that point of the accountant. You know, that how's the accountant doing? You know, the accountant is asking for more money. Should we, in fact, give more money? And so it's sort of, it's a council budget decision, but we wouldn't make it probably without the advice of the manager who works the most closely. You know, and, you know, if Tori comes in and says, you know, this guy's a Yoko, I can't get anything from him, you know, that we would pay attention to that. But then we get back to, well, I guess then we'd make the decision to not renew the contract.
Well, but there's a difference between budgeting for the contract and managing the contract.
Right.
Those are two different things.
I think that well, and maybe there's been real problems with it, but it seems to sort of flow. I think that there is from time to time, there was sort of a thought about authority, but those could be worked out.
So maybe the thing what to do, like we could draft up a policy, as Arthur recommended, that said, you know, here are the types of things. There's the hiring for the staff, and then there are other contracts. And here's the general process that we would expect for each of them to follow. And the council and the manager will make a decision before those processes are executed as to who is responsible for that.
Let me ask, Ron, do you know of, any of the other municipalities that you know of have an approach to this?
Not off the top of my head. I don't know if there are any written procedures.
But
you know, Chevy Chase View has one employee.
Yeah, right.
So it's not an issue there. Town of Chevy Chase, their charter is a little bit different. Their charter vests some real express authority in the manager, and I believe the manager there does the hiring and the firing And once the council has approved the expenditures to create the positions,
But that's also a larger staff.
Sure.
Yeah, that's much
Yeah.
bigger, yeah, yeah.
Yes, I mean, section 3 and 5, 1 employee each. Garrett Park, 3 employees, and I don't know what they do, but I could find out from
Right.
Gene Swearingen if you'd like, if it would be helpful.
Yeah, I think it might be helpful to get some language, some comparisons. This came, let me just say, historically, this came up because we were considering hiring police. And the question is, who has authority? Could the manager do it? Did we have to say yes? Did we have to take a vote on it? And
Do we have to vote on 2 people or 2 specific people?
yeah, on names or what? And so it was very unclear at that time what the council's role was, what the manager's role was, whether this whole thing should be regularized.
But isn't it that whatever the council decides to delegate to the manager
Right.
is what the process should be,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And then, so that's the question, what is delegated?
So council could delegate to interview, council could delegate to select, or council could delegate to recommend, and
Right.
then the council makes the final
Right.
decision.
These
But
are
there's
all
only
possible.
so many
Yeah.
options. But we can say
Right.
that the policy could be that
Yeah.
the council reviews and decides at that point. Again, this does not happen very often.
Yeah.
What is the most appropriate?
I kind of like that the manager does all the detailed work, whether it's on contracts or hiring, checks references, comes up with a recommendation.
But there's no reason to box the council into that just one solution, right? The council could make that decision depending on what the situation is at the time.
Well, then it's
Well, these are
we're back to where
back
we
to
were.
reaches.
Every case is different.
Tori, I didn't come back.
What's wrong with that?
Well, there's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
that.
But that seems to me to be the easiest. I mean, it isn't like we're IBM.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
right.
like we're
Yeah.
hiring 12,000 people
Yeah.
a week.
Yeah.
I mean, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy enough to decide on a case-by-case basis that we want to sit in on the interviews, and so we'll schedule them at night. Tori, will you talk to these people and their references, and then we can decide whether we have to see them, or you may advise us that we'd better see them.
Yeah.
We just need one sentence that says,
Yeah.
discretion remains with the council.
right.
But how do you feel
It
about
sounds
that?
to me like you all want to just keep the hiring authority and delegate tasks related to it as it's convenient to you, because it can be time consuming to
Right.
pull all the references and do the interviews. Because if it's on a case by case basis, let's say I recommend firing the assistant village manager.
Right.
He or she could then lobby you to, on a case-by-case basis, because it's always open for, to override my decision,
Right.
which means I really don't have the authority to fire. So,
But
so
I
let's
think
just call
that
a
in
spade a spade
practice-
and say
right.
you have hiring
In
and firing authority.
practice, that isn't the way it's worked. I mean, that if the assistant manager is the person that the manager is reported to the council that there are these issues and I recommend this action, and the council has gone along with that.
But then who actually does it, I think, is another part of the question. Does that person have do we say, again, this is where I would say go back to the beginning. If we're hiring an assistant manager and we all say, you know what, we want to be part of the interview process, but this is the manager's job to hire an assistant manager, because they're going to be managing them day to day. They're going to be making decisions about their performance at the end. Or are they just making recommendations about their performance?
But it goes back to the same 3 options, right? At that point, you decide, are you taking A, B, or C route, right? In the beginning and at the end, when you're hiring, and if something is... Gone bad.
I'm okay with a case-by-case basis, and
As long as the council has to make the decision to either clearly state, this is who is responsible,
yeah.
or this is who is responsible.
On a day-to-day basis, I almost feel like the building administrator and the code enforcement individual are more critical than the assistant village manager. So, and I'm still not sure I see the practical difference in the employment of
No, in
those
fact, I
people.
would say this would be across the board for all kinds of things.
Every vendor, or however we want to
Almost,
characterize it.
almost
Yeah.
every vendor.
Yeah.
Yeah, that you would recommend. You know, Ryko comes in when you call them, they fix the copier, I suggest we stay with them. You know, this would be, but is that right, that she would?
Yeah, authority resides in the council unless otherwise
Right,
delegated.
right.
How do you feel as a manager with that?
I think that you need to be explicit with it, and I guess cases may come up where we disagree,
Yeah,
and
we have to be able to argue the cases.
I
Is
mean,
there-
it seems hard to imagine that I would say something like, this individual who's supposed to be providing these services, I have asked them to do these tasks, they've failed to do them, I don't think we should continue it, and you like them, and you say, no, you have to continue with them.
Find out.
As a practical matter, if that's the path we're going down, that's not
Well,
going to
no,
work,
that-
so
it-
in a way, it doesn't matter,
That's a
because
possibility, but I don't see it as a likelihood.
No, I think that we count too much on, you know, on you, on the person who's
Yeah.
doing the supervision. I mean, it would be really difficult to say, well, that's just your problem with that
Yeah,
person
right.
because, you know, you would be our greatest source of reference.
Right, exactly.
And if you say there's real issues here, even to the extent that I'm having a very hard time working with this person, we would be supportive of you.
I couldn't see any
If
other
not,
way.
it just means there are more serious problems.
Right, yes. Well, it does. I mean, that's,
Right,
it's
that's right.
the truth.
I think that's
Yeah.
exactly
Okay,
right.
is that enough? Or
Do we need to put words to this effect?
The only thing I would say, I think it's clear enough in the ambiguousness that's here, because it leaves room. I would say, I think it would be helpful, especially for resident purposes, for them to understand when we are going to have a new contract or we are going to have a position. Here are the kind of steps that we intend to follow regarding posting the job. Like you the residents will be made aware that this is happening, that kind of stuff, so that they see there's a process that's being followed, and if they have a concern at that time, then they can raise it with the council who's responsible for the
So
process.
do we need words? Do we need a specific policy?
Or maybe just
We don't even have a
operating
binder of
procedure.
policies, do we?
We don't,
we don't what?
we don't
any
have a binder of policies.
Sure we do.
We can't find
He's
He's
the
got it.
binder.
Yeah.
They're in my binder.
Good. Does that, just a quick question, does that include like our policy on block parties that we did?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that enough of that?
Do
Can
we need
move
enough,
on?
so we don't need anything else?
Well,
Or do you think we need a
if
sentence?
if we ever amend the charter,
Yeah,
we can clarify section 802. We can add one more sentence that says the council may delegate the selection of the employees, and something along those lines, rather than sticking with the single sentence that's there now that says the council may employ.
okay, and what about in a job description?
But as Tiffany said, I do think there is flexibility in the code and charter now.
Yeah, there is.
Whereas you can proceed in this fashion without an amendment. But
Okay,
if we're doing a comprehensive amendment, that's one more thing we can add to the list.
okay.
Okay, so
I'm
let's move on.
satisfied.
Move on. So that then takes
there
us.
to-dos?
Pardon?
Did we establish to-dos?
There's nothing to do.
Okay.
Is that am I right?
That's what
I mean,
keep
there
saying.
is.
Yeah,
That's not my decision to make.
Well, I don't know what we would to do. Do you have
Yeah.
something we would
yeah,
to
is there
do?
language, that's what I'm saying,
let
is
me-
there language that would clarify?
Well, to me, it
I can
sounded-
suggest.
Go
Go ahead.
One of the other things the council's gonna discuss is the compliance review. And
That's this great segue.
I
yeah.
would expect a compliance review to result in proposals for amendments, and this is one of the amendments that could be made following that review. I've got a whole list I can give you dating back to 2006.
Of things that you've seen, problems
Yes.
that you've encountered.
Yes.
That areas where that we're saying two different things or that what we're saying isn't clear.
Right, or yeah, this is an issue that's come up. We'll address it.
Sort of
when
like
we-
the nominating committee, of where in the charter we say one thing and in the
Exactly, yes.
yeah, and the
But can you
ordinances we
restate
say another.
what that sentence would be?
Yeah, to section 802, we would add something to clarify that the council may delegate the selection of specific employees to the village manager.
And is there value of creating a simple procedure for what will we do if there's a new contract out for bid or hiring someone?
Kind of the standard of what we talked about before, you know, if
Right,
we
so
are
to me
gonna
that's
bid a
what
new
you do.
contract,
Someone
It-
needs to put together the procedure.
I'm happy
sorry.
to take a stab.
Okay,
Okay.
Yeah, and
So just to be sure, I understand, council may delegate the selection of specific employees to the village manager, which,
well, don't
It's not
bind me
just-
to that language.
but isn't that just
Yeah,
restating
Yes.
the option that's already available?
yes.
Yes,
Correct.
How is that clarifying?
because the charter trumps the code. And right now, the charter says the council may employ those who it deems necessary. So one may argue, even though the code says we can have an employee manual, we can delegate this or that to the manager, the charter is our constitution and can't be modified by a code. You know,
He doesn't like the may. I find flexibility in may.
Well, that's what I read, may or may not.
and then,
All right.
nice segue into external compliance review. Would you like to talk about that?
Sure. If you, so we've had a couple of things come up in the past few months that we've found as we've been going through the charter and the code that have conflicted. Richard just raised one, you know, the difference in numbers.
On the elections
on the
committee.
election ethics committee. There's also election ethics in the charter says that the council should have adopted policies and procedures that they are supposed to operate under. We don't have any such policies or procedures. That leads to the discussion of what other policies or procedures do we have? Where are they? So one of the things that we had briefly talked about before was just having a third party come in and do a compliance review that says, you've got your charter, you've got your code, you've got these policies. Do they all mesh with each other? Or have you written the procedures you say you're supposed to have written? Where are they? And then also they can look at, you know, the internal piece and then also look at the external piece of making sure that our charter, our code, and our policies don't conflict with state law, kind of like the traffic stuff. So I feel like we've been finding these things one at a time as we've been going, and the you know, idea of, and it's a common practice to bring in, you know, people for a compliance review, would be to have somebody do it holistically. Like, this is their job, to sit down with our documents and say, this is what you've got, this is what you're missing, here are areas of concern, you outright conflict with state law and you cannot park within 10 feet of a parking, you know, fire hydrant. And then also the next step would be best practices, you know. Hey, you don't necessarily conflict with, you know, state law here, but other people are doing these sorts of things. We recommend that you do those things. So the idea, and this is a very draft for discussion purposes, an RFP to put it out, because I do think that most of the folks who have experience in doing this type thing are law firms. So we'd probably be spending around the $10,000 figure, you know, based on having a couple of associates working on it. And I would, you know, even if it's under that, I think I'd recommend that we, you know, put it out for bid so that everybody has a awareness of it.
Would that include like a recommended language if there's gaps, if there are gaps? So they would actually say that this would be a better language for, okay.
I think the most logical person is to have Ron do it, because Ron's been compiling a list of these problems for years.
Ron, have you worked with any, like a compliance review group in the past?
No,
An outside group?
no, I've not.
So you don't have an experience doing it.
Well, I guess my
Yeah.
Wait, that's, which question, are you asking if he's worked with other people who've done it, or are you?
No, has he worked with an outside group to see how it goes? What would be an argument for Ron not doing it?
Well, multiple bids.
Can you bid this to be done? I don't know how somebody would decide how many hours that this is going to take. Or would they bid an fixed price contract?
We could do a fixed price. We could do a, up to X amount and then hourly, and they know they can't, that's their ceiling. They can't go over a ceiling. There's the contract vehicle is an easy thing, I think, to figure out if we agree that this is something we would want to have a third party do, and welcoming the Bolt legal firm to bid on, as I think our charter would require that we put it out, because it could be costly.
I think of any code as a living document, and as we find inconsistencies, we fix them.
Mm-hmm.
I guess why did we not fix them when we found them before?
Go get your notebook out. Is that?
I think.
Well, in fairness
Yeah.
to
Everybody,
prior
yeah.
councils,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, I may raise an issue, and councils may say, yes, that's an issue we'll get around to fixing one day. Is it paramount that we fix it right now? No, because this issue may only come up once every 50 years. So there are a handful of those types of issues.
Well, Tori,
My
I would think-
recollection is the same.
Yeah. And I would say there's also, I'm not just talking about like little language things that need to be fixed. We've got, technical fixes, there's a list, and I think if we just said we want to do the technical fixes tomorrow, that could be taken care of pretty quickly. But the issue of not having policies and procedures for the Election and Ethics Committee, we didn't know that was a problem. You correct me if you knew if it was a problem, but I didn't know that was a problem until
I
we
didn't
read.
know. I had my recollection of having gone through it all at one point was that a committee would be appointed and the committee would establish its own operating procedures. Then a few months ago, I went back and reread it again. I said, "Uh-oh."
The council
The council
is
was supposed
council,
to have
yeah.
done that, and
So-
we never did. So, in your asking around and looking around, do you get it? I think you just mentioned it, but do you get a sense of how much this might cost?
I think around $10,000, and that's
Based on what though?
Uh,
Because I'm going back to Richard's question.
so I checked in with
This figure.
some former government ethics, just friends of mine, and they're an associate working on this, about $350 an hour, two of them, to come up with something. I think their estimate ended up being around like $8,900-$9,500 a range, and they said, and that was for a very basic discussion that we had. I think the benefit of doing this is it's an intentional thing. It's not reactional. We say, look, we found, I just, at least 3 different examples of things we didn't necessarily know we were missing. They're not technical fixes. We just didn't have these things.
I just want to. I didn't mean my question to be critical. I was only saying that as we move forward, since it seems like these things start to build up, every time we come across them, we always
Address.
sort of stay on top of it. It's sort of like housekeeping.
And I think it's also good, we're at a time of transition to where, okay, we have a new village manager, and having a company come in and say, here are the policies that you said you were going to have, you don't have them, then we have the list, and we can say, okay, there are 5 things on the list. We need to prioritize these 2. Like, these are the first 2 that we're going to tackle, and then actually be held accountable for tackling, getting the list taken care of.
How many are on your list since 2006?
I can't tell you off the top of my head. I'll tell you what my practice is. And,
Well, give me a rough estimate. 4?
no, maybe 20.
20.
Yeah.
Do any of those deal with the building code that
Yes.
are
Yeah.
unclear?
Yes.
But it isn't that, we had decided at one point that we would tackle the building code issues all at once. Like, we wanted a certain amount of experience, and I think that we are incredibly good at pushing that can down the road.
Yeah, most of the edits are to the building code. Other ones that come to mind, you might remember from 2009, we identified a potentially unconstitutional issue in the charter, but
We put our heads in the sand on that one.
how it's currently applied,
Right.
it's not a problem because it never comes up. However,
Right.
it's something we ought to fix one day.
Yes.
Another one, that I recall have pointing out various times is a lot of our regulations date back to the time we were a special taxing district. The Ethics Committee is a good example. It refers to rules and regulations set forth in the bylaws. A municipality doesn't have bylaws. We have no bylaws. That dates
Right,
back to the times of the special taxing district. So, that sort of thing needs to be updated.
So all of those terms, bylaws, are no longer applicable.
They don't exist.
I have a suggestion. Ron has this list of stuff he's been collecting that we've managed to avoid. I don't see an identified problem. You're saying we could get somebody in to look it over and find some problem, but I haven't seen any come up. And we do have identified problems that Ron has come up with.
But I think Ron's, your list has been focused more on fixing things
Right, yeah.
that are technical in nature.
Right, yeah. I have pitched this project over the years. Now, I'd love to do a comprehensive review of
Yeah.
the code, and I'm happy to submit a bid with the other bids.
Right.
I think it's great if you want to bid it out.
So when
Absolutely.
I briefly talked with Ron about this, and please correct me if
Yeah.
I'm wrong, there's no, attorneys welcome the review of other,
Yes, one thing I learned as a law school student from my ethics professor, if a client asks for a second opinion, absolutely, you tell your client that's a good idea.
That's a political rather than legal response.
Well, no, yeah,
Nothing wrong with that.
I don't mind an external review. I would love the opportunity to do it as well. And
It just seems like it's going to cost more money.
one suggestion I might have: you may consider parsing out the project. The conflicts of interest review is something that you could do independently of the legal compliance review of your code and charter. I mean, that could be the first step in deciding this other issue that's on the agenda. What are we going to do with the Elections and Ethics Committee? If you do decide to parse them out, you're going to need rules of procedure for both, and maybe an expert in conflicts of interest could advise you on how the Ethics Committee should resolve ethics disputes and come up with those rules and procedures that the council is supposed to have promulgated.
Okay, well,
And then that would also let us know whether we, in fact, in the end, needed two committees. I mean, what we
Right.
need are the basis for both of those, and to see what would be the best way to handle once those recommendations are made.
we have gotten counsel to sever.
Yes, right.
we
No,
are-
I understand.
That's one of those things we have knowledge of.
Yeah. That we haven't acted on.
Yes.
well, I'll restate
Okay.
my suggestion is that we charge Ron to do a comprehensive review based on his knowledge, his notes, and where we're going.
But that's a separate I would say, this is a separate project from regular legal counsel. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, you will have to sit down with your blinders on and go through looking for very specific things.
Correct.
I agree with Arthur. I think he's in the best position and the most economical use of time and resources.
Well, I think it's, again, one of those things that if we agree should be done, and Ron certainly is open to it, that I think we ought to get a number of proposals and find out how much it's going to cost. Part of the criticism has been that the council isn't transparent, that they just hand out things this is a chance to change that, and we need to, I think, do a request for proposals. And Ron can certainly be a part of that. And we can decide from that whether there is enough information to actually know how much this is going to cost us, or whether what we get is we believe we can accomplish this, for this much, or we will promise you we will do this at a not to exceed number. And that might be what we really need to ask for. But I think it's worth finding out what's in the community. And that gives us a price.
So, but you don't know, none of the other jurisdictions that you know about around here have done this sort of thing. Is that correct? Or you just don't know?
Yeah, not that I've seen in since 2006 for my handful of clients, but as Tiffany said, it's it's not unheard of.
And it's not wrong to be a leader.
No, I'm just trying to get some experience. Get
I think of the
benefit of
GAO,
experience.
there's an entire agency who,
How many hours are we talking about?
Well,
I mean, your professional
yeah,
opinion.
that's
I mean,
a good question. I think you also need to decide on the scope, because if you were to say
But that,
review everything for compliance with the law, that's a monumental task. But if you have specific concerns, review our procurement laws, review our conflicts of interest laws. Maybe that would narrow the scope and cost.
Did you?
On the other hand, your charter and code, aren't
Very
that
short,
voluminous. Yeah. And
they're
and
very
someone familiar with municipal law can
Go through it.
can
pretty fast.
read it and say,
Oh.
under state law, this is what it should be.
So I just looked at the, $350 an hour. It's about 25 hours for what I heard the range would be $9,000. It'd be 25 hours worth of work.
25 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound right? I mean,
Well, why don't you wait until you get my bid?
At the new rate, not the old one.
Ron just said 4,200.
Going.
I hope I'm going to have an advantage because I don't have to start from scratch.
Right.
Yeah.
and one thing that's not on here is the suggested language for changes, right?
Right, mitigation stuff.
Well, it can just say you, in theory, need to fix this, but not to suggest actually how.
So,
Yeah,
what's-
and
So are we going ahead to put out a bid?
Well, and Ron, this is where we run into, here's a conflict of interest for you. You look at this, then we run into a conflict of you competing for it, correct?
It's public information.
Well,
If he
Are you
provides
ask-
counsel on what to include or
Oh,
not include
oh.
in an RFP, and then he were to compete for the,
only if the language was such that it excludes everybody.
Right.
And any only one-person firms can.
Right.
with 6 years of experience in the village of Lawrence.
no, yeah,
And 2 children.
that's a good point, Tiffany. Let me think about it.
Okay.
I mean, the
Yeah.
ethical rules are pretty clear. I cannot obviously represent you in the negotiation of my contract. Whether I can represent you in an RFP that I would want to submit a proposal, and it raises questions too. Let me
I want to
think
keep
about
you
that.
clean and
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so our first step is you're going to check on that, and then, but
Well-
we are going to go ahead.
Well, maybe I don't even need to. I mean,
let's maybe if you guys have feedback, Koch has already given one thing that needs to be added, but
and there are plenty of lawyers in the village that could. Tiffany's husband. You know, take a quick look at the. No, all right. Sorry, I didn't mean to nominate.
Okay, so where, you want a motion to move on this?
do we need we can just do it, can't we?
Well,
It's an RFP.
to send out an RFP,
One thing is, this is not in the budget.
right.
We should, for full disclosure purposes, this is not in the budget.
So
Well, you can amend the budget once
once we,
you
Get
know what
the-
it's going to cost
Right.
exactly.
All right.
so,
If
and we
you-
don't
if you
need a
wish.
motion to move ahead.
You
It's administrative, isn't it?
yeah
Okay,
you could approve the specific RFP once it's ready.
right, okay.
Okay. So I'll work on the changes maybe with, and Tori, I want to make sure that if there's anything you see that would help you going forward, that we make sure it's explicit in there.
I don't have experience with hiring a comprehensive legal compliance like this.
But if
So
if your experience in the office has led you to say, I feel like there may be something I'm missing or something's conflicting, and you can identify what that is, then and it would make sense to include it in here. I think that's a part of the purpose.
Absolutely.
Pointing us in a direction, but if we can help.
Okay, and the next one is the discussion to separate the Elections and Ethics Committee into two committees. Will that be part of this compliance review? Is that going to,
That's something we have to decide on our own separately.
well, and I was really supportive of that, and particularly that we get an ethics committee that puts together some policies and procedures, and what an ethics committee does.
I would suggest, I have a suggestion that we not have an ethics committee. And I'll give you the reasons. I think in the history of in the history that we've had an election and ethics committee, we've had only one referral to it. Should we appoint a committee that never does anything? And I would suggest that the language in the code could easily be changed to, instead of saying referring things to election committee, to refer things to the council for decision. The council could take on all the functions that are now allocated to an ethics, the ethics part of the electors committee.
Well, I think recently there's been a lot of things that have come up in referencing ethics. So to completely eliminate that.
There's only been one case in the history that has been referred to the ethics as an ethics issue.
Can I have any input at all? As I think
Sure.
former, maybe
Wait.
possibly current ethics committee member?
Would you mind coming forward just so we can pick you up on the recorder, Mr. Trump?
Yeah, if
Thank you.
not, that's okay. I can wait till the end.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's not.
But we're allowing it.
Steve Trummer, Raymond Street. I think my term has expired as ethics and Election committee, but as a former member, there is a clear mandate for an ethics and elections committee. My imagination would be that when the charter and the code were drafted, the ethics committee was there to serve to review candidates for council and look for ethical issues, conflicts of interest. As the village has expanded, those issues have expanded to other parts of the village manager, village employees, village staff. This election that we all went through, this painful sort of election recently, was about transparency and conflicts of interest, and it would be, I think it would not serve the best interest of the village to eliminate that role, but I can tell you as one of three and the minority member on the committee, there was a conscious decision not to embrace or not to review ethics. If the committee doesn't do its job, and its job is to advise the council when asked to review a situation, the council has to replace the committee or appoint new members. And I think that it would be to take the ethical review process and put it into the hands of council, which is the same body for which it's supposed to serve as advisory oversight, would be a mistake. Politically, legally, morally.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ron,
Good.
so we're exempt from state
Good
ethics
point.
law,
Correct,
but we
currently.
adopted, right, I mean, chapter 4 of the code is all conflict of interest, and it's that what establishes the committee and gives the committee responsibilities.
Right.
Why was that done?
So the village was incorporated in 1986, I believe. The village did not have a code for about 3 years. Now, at the time the village incorporated, there was a state ethics law requiring municipalities to have election laws of their own. And what the founding fathers of Martin's Additions did was, in adopting the very first code, included an ethics code but simultaneously asked the state for an exemption from the state law to the extent that what the founding fathers adopted was not good enough for the state. The state looked at it and said, based on what you've done, you're exempt from state law. We think your code is sufficient for your jurisdiction.
So is that threat now gone because we wouldn't have that piece of the state?
Well, yeah, what the state law provides is the State Ethics Commission is supposed to review on an annual basis whether an exemption should be continued. In 2006, in response to events in Prince George's County and the former executive being indicted on federal charges, we all remember the news, the legislature found that stricter rules need to apply to local jurisdictions. So some of the exemptions that were in place were removed. And the Ethics Commission adopted somewhat of a bright line test. If your budget is over 1.7 million, you're not going to be exempt. We still fall under that threshold.
And population, I think, too.
Yes, yeah.
There's a population.
Correct, yeah. Population and budget are the two items that they look at. They're not obligated by the state statute to restrict their review to that test. That's a test that they've informally adopted. It's possible at any time the exemption could be removed, but currently that's the test that's applied.
But our redoing our ethics is not going to challenge that.
No.
I mean, that we can do what we want with it and we'll continue to have our exemptions.
Correct. Yeah, and so
Right.
that's a great question because the original exemption was conditioned. It said, we find you are exempt based on what you've done.
Right.
And then in 2012, thank you, we sought clarification that if we do make amendments, we're not stuck under that condition dating back to 1986. And so we have a current blanket exemption. So if we do amend our code, we don't have to seek state's approval of that amendment.
Right, okay.
If we weren't exempt, how would our procedures be different? Would they have?
We would have to establish an ethics committee with investigative authority, fining authority. We would have to have council members and candidates for office file financial disclosure statements, which call for the disclosure of stocks you own and companies that may or may not even do business with the jurisdiction, real property that is owned, derived income from your spouse and children.
Yeah.
It's actually a big deal for those, like, I was there at Chevy Chase Village when they were talking about it, and they had a lot of problems getting people.
Candidates.
One person actually
And some
said-
resignations.
Yeah, some people resigned because of it.
Yeah, well, at the same time, around 2012, as I recall, there was an article in the Washington Post. See who has made sound financial decisions. A reporter got his or her hands on all the statements filed by Congress. So there is the potential for unintended use of financial disclosure statements. Yeah.
Okay, so the call, I think Steve makes a good point that the council, if the council were to take the role of an ethics committee, it could end up reviewing its own behavior, which is
right. Yes,
a
yeah,
problem.
yeah. As the code is currently written,
Right.
mostly what you're regulating is conflicts of interest. Mostly it's
Right.
going to be the council in making
Right.
decisions, and so the committee is set up not only to hear complaints, but to give advisory opinions. If a council member has a question, should I
Is
recuse
this
myself?
Right, is this a
And
conflict
you've got
of
that
interest?
avenue.
There's also stuff in the, it applies to the manager, to the staff. No
Correct.
official may
Management
solicit,
staff,
gift,
employee,
knowing,
right.
acceptance.
right.
There are several things in here. There's procedures about if there are complaint processes,
Yeah.
what do we do?
Mhm.
So,
So do
Yep.
you see a committee an ethics committee enforcing what's there or also reviewing what's there in order to expand on it? That there are policies that aren't covered?
I would say that,
Their
we need to look
charge.
at what's here and see
and their charge would be to see if
Yeah,
there's more.
I mean, I can tell you what I think is missing,
Hmm.
and we saw it play out.
Hmm.
If a complaint is received, what procedures should the ethics committee follow?
Okay.
In the town of Chevy Chase, for example, there is a complaint form, which requires specific information to be provided so that the ethics committee can do its job. Then step 2 is, how is the ethics committee going to address the complaint? Is a hearing necessary? Are interviews necessary? Is a written decision going to be issued? At what point does the review become public? Is the hearing to be held in closed session? So on and so forth. Those are the types of procedures that.
Does was that the towns, did you say, or the villages?
That's town of Chevy Chase.
And does the village have one also, do you know?
I don't know.
There was a document here.
Okay. Oh, I don't know if they've issued written procedures.
Okay.
They do have a commission under state law, and that commission is supposed to have procedures. So my guess is yes, they have written procedures that you could borrow from, just
I
like
think
the
when
town
you
of Chevy
gave us,
Chase.
we asked you to look, when
Oh,
I
at
skimmed
this.
this before,
Yeah.
what you showed appeared to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if they have an ethics body, it is separate from the election.
Oh, yeah, there's none that have the combined.
There are none that are together.
Yeah. But,
Need a motion?
but North Chevy Chase, Section 5, Chevy Chase View has they don't have an ethics code, and they don't have a committee. Garrett Park has no ethics code.
But there's nothing wrong with being,
No, I'm just saying that this shows you the possibilities.
What sort of a motion do we need?
We don't need a motion, we just need to agree whether or not
We're
we're
going to
gonna
separate.
amend the code.
Yeah. So, and then the next question is, do you want to save this change for your comprehensive review, or do you want to make it now? Technically, under the charter, you're supposed to appoint the committee right now.
Well, when this isn't under the charter, this is under the code. This is a change to the code.
Correct. But yeah, exactly. Under the charter, you're supposed to appoint your elections
Right,
committee
right.
basically, as soon as possible.
Right.
I
Yeah.
would say we could, I think severing them so that when we need to put out a call to residents to say,
Mhm.
we're gonna have an elections committee with a minimum of 3. We're gonna have an ethics
Yeah.
committee with a minimum of 3. If you
Yeah.
have interest.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
we
And you
need
could
to get the
appoint the committee
volunteers.
now as a joint committee with 3, and then
And
at
then
such time
separate
it's
it.
separated, the understanding could be,
Right.
you 3 folks stay on as the election committee, and we'll appoint 3 others.
Or we just wait, if we introduce this now, or not now, if we introduce a amendment to the ordinance
Mhm.
in August, then it's what, right, September? October?
Correct.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, it's gonna take time. Yeah. That's okay.
And I would say if we could do this first, but some of the other house cleaning, if we can get it done before we have the compliance review, if it's truly technical fixes in nature, then why not do them? Get rid of the words bylaws. I went through and crossed out bylaws.
Okay, so we're moving ahead on this.
Yeah, so
Moving
a
on to
direction
separation.
to come up with
Yeah.
ordinance changes to separate the elections, the ethics from the election.
And in the meantime, we're gonna put out
And that'll be
a
really
call.
cheap, because
Yeah.
Tiffany's already written it.
And in the meantime, we're going to put out a call for volunteers for the elections
Election.
and ethics
Well,
committee.
but essentially for elections.
now. Elections for now.
For elections, yeah.
Wait, why not ethics?
Why not do both? Can
Yeah.
we do both?
Well,
We can call for them.
are you gonna meet in August? Well, I would suggest do a call for the elections and ethics committee right now. Appoint 3. At such time as the ordinance is adopted, severing, then you appoint 3
Three
more
more.
to the new committee.
Right,
So do we need
Unless
time
somebody
to
wants
adopt
to
an
be
ordinance?
on
yes,
Well,
ethics versus election.
yeah. we
that's
need-
true. But
I
you
think,
can
yes.
reappoint if that's the
There,
case.
I think there has to be 30 days to change an ordinance.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ordinance has to be introduced to the public. You got to have a public hearing, and then the effective date is 20 days after that, as I recall.
Okay.
Okay, so we will
We'll
proceed.
do
You're
a call.
You're drafting
summary.
Cut and paste what you already did.
Okay, then the next thing was the survey. Katya prepared, I thought, a fairly easy first time around survey. That there were a lot of ideas about adding things to it. And I thought for the first time around that this was sort of simple and would give us some baselines, that it had a lot of the good questions in it. Did you have a chance to review it?
Yes. I mentioned, I sent out a note. A good friend of mine was a deputy director of the census for 12 years, responsible for all household surveys. And there is a huge basis of knowledge and experience here on how to do surveys that generate the kind of information that you want and that's useful. I sent around some of the questions he raised.
Well, you
Yeah.
send out things to keep in mind when you write the
Right,
survey, and I
right,
think that
yeah.
they are actually all reflected in here.
Yeah, they are.
Those
right.
are the same things I kind of kept in mind, just logically. What
Right.
would you want to do? First, establish the whole purpose for the survey, right? I'm hoping this is going to be an annual thing, and if there is going to be any follow-ups, we could always issue follow-up surveys to clarify if something is
Right.
unclear. We need to state how long it's going to be open, so I was thinking 2 weeks from whatever date it's posted. This is done on SurveyMonkey, which for, I believe, $26 a month gets you 1,000 responses, right? So we could send it out to residents. If we don't have email addresses, which my understanding is we actually have 90% of email addresses for the village, we could ask people who haven't provided one if they would like to participate, give us an email address. We can only add you to the survey if you do not wish to be part of anything else, right? And then that would be our pool for resident feedback going forward. I mean, I think it would be a great tool. We could ask here, how are we doing as council? How is the village office doing? How, are they responsive? Are we responsive? Are people generally happy with village operations? What sort of services they would like to see? And this is all very simple, but
Right. Now, here are a number of questions that come up. You listed in a draft, getting your first ideas out, a couple of services. But there's lots of services out there. The question is, which one, do you include all of them, some of them? Why some and not others? Let me just suggest a few.
okay.
It actually turns out to be a long list of things the village does.
So that-
Trees on the right of way. The village handles, the planting, the watering of trees. Other kinds of, what would you call it? Gardening in the area, the butterfly garden and other kind of areas that we trim the grass and stuff. Road repair, sidewalks, streetlights, recycling, snow plowing, street signs, recycle bags, the website, email contact, newsletter, directory. These are all services, and the question is, what are we interested in?
Right.
Which of these do we want information on?
So
Why select some rather than others?
What I was thinking when I
Yeah.
was putting this together, and that was just my gut feeling, right? Whatever is above what normal county services are, is what we would call out. Because presumably residents would at least get that, county level services. There's some that go well beyond that, and we pay money for that, in some cases significant amounts of money. And so we just want to pulse check on whether that's what residents are interested
Okay,
in
so
getting.
the criteria would be services going beyond county, with county provision.
Right. So additional police patrol, right? We have better trash collections in terms of that they're picking it up from the back twice a week. Bulk trash that
Right,
is, when it's coming.
right.
So things like that. That's what I was using as a guiding principle. If I'm missing something,
Oh, okay, no, because it wasn't clear why some of these
so maybe
things
that
were
should be
on-
clarified in the actual question,
Yeah.
right?
But I would assume that, I mean, it isn't the same questionnaire that goes out every time. So for instance, we could at a future one say, we've got the tree issue. Do you think we ought to control trees on private property? Do you, I mean, you could be asking those sorts of questions in the future. So
Right,
this,
I thought-
this gives us a baseline.
Tori also, her comments about, I think a lot of those were, you know, the service-oriented ones and getting into, you know, more granularity. So if we did like a general temperature check, but then had a plan for, okay, we have these questions about service-oriented ones, and a very detailed list, you know, things that came from her. Or when it comes to streetlights, you know, how much light is too much, you know, what are we gonna do? All of those kind of things, you know. I think using this for a tool, I put in my just notes from the conference for you guys that you know, surveys are huge tools that most of the other municipalities are using now, and I think having using something that's online, if we can announce to residents like, look, this is coming, and this is the cheap and easy way for us to be able to get the data and aggregate it and analyze it. I hope that would encourage them to participate.
And then, say if a committee comes back with a recommendation for whatever it is, we could actually get resident feedback fairly easily if
Okay,
we
now,
use surveys. If we,
there are a couple of other questions that come up. Would it be anonymous?
so here
According
was
to my
my,
friend, if you come to the last thing and say, put in your street address, people are gonna rip it up.
well,
And that's
so
the
it's
question.
the reason why I put it there
Yeah,
is because I could not figure out a way, and maybe it's, you know,
to get one per household.
exactly,
Yeah,
right? So it's useful if you can weed out multiples.
Right,
And that's why
yeah,
that was
I
the
can
easiest
see
way of
that.
doing it.
Right. There are possible other, well, using paper there are other ways. I don't know about email.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
these days everything's electronic.
We have more email addresses than there are households. And if you go,
But
if
most
you-
spouses talk to each other.
yeah, right, but then if you don't have an anonymity, you're gonna lose a lot of respondents.
You don't know that.
Yeah, we do. You lose half, you lose 50%. They come to that and they say, oh, they want my address.
Well, but we're asking for other things, Arthur. We're asking them what they want to help with the council.
Well, you
What-
could do things like, if you have a skill that if you want to participate,
Right.
here's an email address or, website to go to.
Well, but I think including it also would encourage people to
Now-
complete the
Well,
form
according to, experience, you lose. just
with
a lot of-
the census.
Well, with surveys.
Yeah.
Surveys in general. As soon as you lose anonymity, you lose a large share of the respondents.
Well, I would try it and see how
Does
we
your friend
do.
have counsel about how to get, if those people, if that's a block for them providing feedback, is there another, I don't know how the census gets, how do you get feedback from them?
Feedback from.
Like if someone says, I'm not doing this unless it's anonymous.
Oh.
Like they won't come to a
One of
meeting.
the things
they
he
won't-
strongly recommends is doing a field trial, where you just go to 4 of your friends, say, here's the thing, start filling it out, I'm gonna watch you do it. And you see them, what does this mean? And then you start
I've done
looking
that
around
actually.
you.
I've
Right.
asked people at work to read it because it's only 10 questions.
Right,
And I got their feedback. Is it clear?
yeah.
So,
Well, there are issues, like, for example, when the trash pickup twice a week from side or backyard, and then you have, as opposed to once per week at the curb. So you're not asking, that kind of muddies it. If you were-
So-
It's not parallel, there's
so-
like an omitted thing here.
so you actually pointed out the, what is the qualifier for listing it here?
Yeah,
And if we qualify that in the actual question,
I see, I see.
then
That
we
would-
could remove that,
Right,
and
right,
that would
yeah.
make that option.
And now, another
Yeah.
thing, in just editing, when you have, what changes or additional services, there's one where you list what the cost is, but none of the others have costs associated with it.
So why did I list the cost there?
Yeah.
This is on police patrols. There's been a lot of traffic on that,
Yeah,
and so I thought that we needed to quantify it so that we would, otherwise we'd get, oh, we want police patrols 7 days a week,
right.
24 hours a day.
But then you would say, trash pickup once a week, how much are you
would that
saving
save?
on that?
How much for that saving?
So you can
Yeah.
get some comparison. Here, I would make a suggestion. Have a work session and get my friend in to work with us on it. And I think with his experience, we could just sit down with the council in an open work session and work through it and have it so that we would get a solid survey, get usable maximum results.
So I think there's a couple of things.
Yeah.
So first we need to really have a more thorough understanding of whether or not it's possible to do it anonymously through SurveyMonkey. It maybe is, right? So
Well,
only
you could do
one-
it now just by not having.
Well, no, but still tracking whether there's multiples,
Yeah.
multiple responses from each email address,
Yeah.
let's say. So maybe, Tori, would you mind taking a look at that, just to see if
Whether
that's a
we have-
possibility? Like through surveymonkey.com, right, it does surveys.
But
Whether
look-
one of
look
those
at what-
options allows to actually track that
I
they
don't
only
think
get one
you
response.
can track an email address to an email address to a street address.
No. What I'm saying is one per email address.
One per email.
At least we will know that every
they're
one
not
person
sending in-
only responded once, as opposed to
Right, right.
15 times to kind of.
Oh, right, oh, yeah,
You're asking, can SurveyMonkey ensure that there's only one response?
per
email address?
Right,
One submission.
yeah.
I mean, I do have 5 email addresses, so.
And can you do it just to the ones that
But
we send
when we're
out?
entering it the first time, if it's clear, right, the same name, usually email addresses have names.
The other one is, can anybody just go to that site, or do you have to be invited? I mean,
Well, you have to be invited to that survey.
yeah, but can anybody go to that, can anybody get the address of that survey and
Click on the
link
link
on
and
and
do
do
the
it?
survey.
I don't know. Suppose I send it out to, 50 friends in New York. and
I
say-
can, I'll spend some time on this so it's not, I mean, I think, Katya, you've done some work. Maybe you could spend a little, like, SurveyMonkey, it functions. And
Yeah, right.
They figured out some way
Right.
to do this. So we're novices at this, but they're
I was just saying you could take
well-organized
like one phone
organization.
call to just
Yeah.
ask.
Like
Yeah.
you
How
send
do
in a
we-
list of emails to SurveyMonkey and say, these are the only eligible
Right.
email
So
addresses
that's why I was
that can
thinking Tori, because
respond.
she can just during the day hopefully call them customer service to say, how do we do this? What option do we need? Because there's various things that you can purchase, right? So a yearly subscription or whatever.
Sure, I can look into that. I think that on Constant Contact, we may have something like 450 or 500 email addresses. And I think there's like 900 and some residents. There's a lot of residents we don't have an email address for.
But as long as we have one per household,
We don't know that it's one per household.
We're
It's
close.
just email
Would-
address. I
I
don't
mean,
even know
Tori,
the
I-
names
I can
associated
say-
with most of those.
I can say that when Arthur had me send emails earlier this year, I counted and discussed with Ron, I had about 30 households that I couldn't match a specific email or to that household.
You mean just by looking at the email addresses,
Using
trying to
what?
identify
How did you
name?
do that?
I used the email addresses that had been sent out. You know, every
Not
time.
Constant Contact, they
No,
were through.
Not,
Okay.
not constant contact.
Got it.
and if we know which homes we're missing, we literally could ring the
Or we could
doorbell.
put a note in the newsletter saying,
That too.
as you said, we're doing this survey.
And we did that at the advice of council who said we need to make sure these messages are widely distributed, so we.
It's my understanding when the directory got put together, is there's no email addresses in there because there's a lot of people that don't want their email addresses public. Constant Contact, as a company, is very concerned that you not push to someone who doesn't want to be.
And there's a law, I mean, can't.
Yeah, and then anyone who's in Constant Contact is opted in, and the same with the listserv, they've opted in, right?
Yes.
I mean, we don't wanna push it to people who haven't opted into one of these things, right? Or do we?
Well, we can alert them.
We can alert them.
How just said, you can say, we are doing the survey. If you want to participate, we would urge you to participate. And if you're not on the list, for this one time only, we can
I mean, we could, like, there's gotta be some way to email them the individual link.
Yeah.
But people opted into Constant Contact. My understanding of opting into it was to receive official communications from the village. And if the council's conducting a survey, that's an official communication.
I mean, you could put a link to the survey in a push for
Yes,
contact.
that is what I'm suggesting, sorry.
Okay,
I thought you
so,
meant lifting the emails out of Constant Contact and putting them in the
well,
Survey Monkey.
that too. That may be to verify that these are only coming from,
How do we figure that out? Like, we
Yeah.
have to figure out whether or not we can do it.
how do you verify that you're only getting them from authorized sources?
okay, we're talking to Survey Monkey. We're getting some more answers, and we're coming back next month?
MailChimp.
Should
Okay.
we do a work session to go over it?
Sure.
Yes.
Could your friend do this? I mean, what's the time?
Yeah, he's retired. He can bike
But he
over.
could be in China.
He lives in Chevy Chase View.
He could be in
Okay.
China.
Yeah. No,
So can we agree that we will do the work session before the next meeting in August?
yeah.
Can we have a meeting?
Sure.
I think so.
We haven't agreed on the meeting in August.
Okay.
See how I snuck that in there?
Well,
Okay, good.
financial,
Thanks for
It
pushing
got
this
us going.
topic.
financial,
Oh, financial. Where's the financial report? As a former
7.
treasurer,
7.
got it. I decided to do something here that we've not done before. Show the original budget and the amended budget. And I should note that the amended budget is only amended to take account of budget items where we're spending more than we originally thought. We never reduce.
Right.
So the amended budget is always higher than the original, because we're only taking account of things that are where the cost goes up.
We used to reduce,
Well,
so we'd come closer.
the thing is that we're only required to increase it because we cannot spend more than we
Right,
budgeted.
right. No, I understand the
So-
requirement, but we also have the auditors who complain if you aren't closer to your actual numbers.
Right.
So we should be reducing as well as kicking them up.
Okay, well,
We didn't. Okay, that's
we
fine.
haven't. And what we can see there is the income, mainly because of the personal income tax, is 25% more than we had estimated at the beginning of the year. So our revenues are really going up. And even after we amended up the budget about 2 months ago, our income continues to have overrun even what we had thought at the time. So at the beginning of the year, we thought we were going to get $840,000. We then amended it up to $950,000. We have actually gotten almost $1,990,000 as of the most recent date. Our expenses are running below, considerably below. Now, this is the June report, the end of the fiscal year, but there's still a lot of invoices that are outstanding, so the books haven't closed.
Right.
So the books are still open. But we're getting closer, but we're still, I went through line item by line item, and we are considerably underrunning almost every budget category, except where we did have to ask for increases, and that was legal fees, insurance because of the police patrols required higher insurance, and snow removal. But I still think that our expenses for the year will be under 600,000. We're originally budgeted 685,000. So we got money in the bank.
Okay, we had a proposal to add a category to the budget.
Yeah.
Because Wayne bills,
It was not a separate category. What happened to that it kind of dropped out of the
No, it's here.
agenda?
This is FY16 budget amendment.
Oh, right, there it is.
And
Okay.
so we
Yeah.
need to add a
Right.
category so that we are understanding better what he's doing.
Right.
So is it in here now, 52, 22, and 24? Or is that the new categories? Is it already been put in?
No.
No, we have to take a vote. on that.
Yeah, we have to take a vote on it. So right now, what exists under 5220 is 5222.
Which is the Allen.
Building, yeah, it's the building review and permit, the
Okay.
administrator. And then 5224, which we had as enforcement and oversight.
Okay, and then we
So
need
to
it.
create a
A new-
5226.
Right.
That would be municipal operations,
Yeah.
or municipal maintenance and operations.
And we divide the monies that are in 52, 24 into 52, 24, and 26.
Yes, and Wayne, per the conversation with Wayne, since he's the one who kind of highlighted this as an issue and explained it, that 5224, his approximate is about $12,000, and 5226, the approximate is 28, which is what was the total of 40.
Okay, do I have a motion to amend the budget to reflect those changes?
Move to amend the budget
Sec-
items and separate the funds as council members.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion carried. Moving on to
Tori, you good?
tree committee.
Oh, tree committee.
It's still our,
Go back. We have a member of the tree committee here, Chris Fleming. Thank you for all your work. She's educated me about trees. A friend of mine says, "You're the tree committee, you don't know the difference between a maple and an oak."
Or a canopy tree or a tree canopy.
Okay, that's right. Let me highlight what I think is useful at this point is just to get this on the record, to get council members an opportunity to look at it, and also to have the community have a chance to look at this. Try to do a number of things as specified in the scope of work that established the committee. And we looked at trends of what was happening in Martin's Addition and compared it to the past of our own history and other communities. And what we see is, compared to other communities, we're doing okay. Comparing to the past, we've lost a lot of trees. And the thing that really seems to have driven it is bigger houses and more paving. Patios, driveways, roofs, and everybody building out to the maximum of the building code and new housing. What was particularly striking, though, in the very latest overhead survey is that the analyst noted there were these losses, but she also said there has not been a net loss because the older trees are getting bigger, which was a really striking finding. Mature trees, mature trees get larger. The other thing that we found is that in the neighboring jurisdictions that have permit requirements to take down a tree, it does not, there's an administrative cost to it, and it doesn't actually save that many trees. Something like 90%, 95% of all requests to take down a tree are approved. And so there are very few trees actually saved.
but you got to add into the point of how
Yeah.
many didn't apply.
How many didn't apply? We don't know. But since 95% of those that are requested are approved, it doesn't seem as though there's a very strong impact. Just logically, we don't know, but just logically. The other thing that really shocked me, I started doing a literature review of the benefits of trees, the economic and other benefits. They're huge. Every single study that looks at it, econometric, economic analysis, I have not seen one study that says they're a waste of time and money. They confer benefits to the individual homeowner and to a ring around. It's not just the individual, but the studies that use GIS mapping, and they look at transactions, prices, how much did this house sell for, what are the attributes of that property, are there trees on it, trees really add substantial amount to the value of that house and to the surrounding community. And I was really surprised at the unanimity and the size of the effects. Pulling all that together, we came up with a policy recommendations that you can read at your leisure. But one is that it makes sense economically and environmentally for the village to help subsidize the planting of private trees. The Chevy Chase Section 5 does this. The first year they did it, they got a tremendous response, and then much smaller from the year after that. And what I got, and what we got from that experience, is a lot of people would like to do it, would like to plant trees. They don't know how. Who do you call? What trees? Who's going to plant? Who are the good nurseries? We don't know. But if there was a village help in doing that, and a subsidy that would get people over the hump and get them to plant. So this would be for the tree canopy of the future. The other main recommendation is that we're not asking for a permit to take down a tree. If you take down a tree during a building construction project, you plant them. And this is again looking to the future. So that we're looking at the future canopy, making sure that we have solid canopy trees, native species that will thrive well in this area, that will provide the benefit over time. And so they're the two main recommendations that I will cite at the moment. I would like at some future point to have the opportunity for the committee to come in here, to invite the public in, perhaps either a special work session or during a regular council meeting, to go over this and make sure that the community has a greater opportunity to go over it and publicize the findings, get people to take a look at the report.
And I don't remember if in the report, did you talk about building size and water management issues?
I did, yeah. That, what complicates, and not only are people tending to build to the maximum size permitted by the building code, but Montgomery County has a requirement for increased water retention on site. And that usually is dry wells, and that restricts where you can put trees. So on small lots, there's kind of little corner over here and a little corner over here on the property is about the only place you can put a tree these days. So that's another thing driving the loss of trees. So when there is construction going on, there's a tendency to cut down the trees, and then there's, on smaller lots, very little opportunity, place to plant.
Should we cause a review of the building code again because of that?
That's a completely different issue that
Yeah, I know.
the tree committee didn't feel qualified to get into.
I mean, I think proposal number 2 would have to be done under its issuance of permits.
No, proposal 2, I think, was, is that the one, we're just asking for information. This is for
You have to
information.
replant. If you take one down,
Oh, is that true? Yeah, you have to
you have
replant.
to replant, which
Yeah.
the only place I think it would make sense would be to put it in the building.
Yeah. No, building 2 is just asking for information. 3, I think, is asking for,
3 is
Sorry, 3 is the
reforestation, yeah.
reforestation.
yeah, right, 3 and
Okay.
4. 2, what we were finding is that trees are supposed to be listed on site plans, and some do, some don't. And when we were coming in, looking at construction plans, trying to figure out, well, how much are we losing because of construction? Many of the plans just didn't have the information. And I went on the county sites to see what's required, and they said, yeah, it's supposed to be here. And I checked with Alan Beal. He says, yeah, the county code calls for it, but only some builders do it. And I guess we could just say all builders have to do it, is what we're saying here.
Okay, so the recommendation is that we have a work session, that we involve the tree committee and the general public,
And we have a
that we
special invitation to the public.
discuss
discuss
these recommendations
the
and,
findings and the recommendations.
okay.
The value of the trees, the economic value. In fact, there have been even a few studies that I did not cite, I think it may be in passing, that say, does it pay a city to pay for trees?
Right.
And they said, yeah, eventually your assessed property values go up to actually cover the cost. I thought that was pushing it too far. That's what the findings come up with.
And I like the idea of the money being that residents had to put money in because
Right.
our experience with trees on the right-of-way is that residents will not water them, they won't maintain them at
Yeah.
all.
Economists have a phrase, you gotta have skin in the game.
Yeah. Okay,
Put some of your own money in, you take good responsibility.
okay.
So do we have a target date on when we want to have this?
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
in August.
August or September when
Well,
people
August
are
people
back.
have vacations.
So do you want to
Yeah.
wait till September?
I think, yeah,
September.
yeah.
Okay, we'll schedule something in September. Okay, managers.
Does every council member now have a copy of it?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
And it's on our website.
It's on the website too.
It's a great report.
Centennial celebration is next.
Oh, the centennial?
And just for the record, Arthur had replied to me that everybody on the tree committee signed up on the.
Yes, and in fact, I have to say that the strictest, the person calling for the strictest replanting and everything is a builder. So
Interesting.
we used his input
To do that.
and he says they can do it. They'll figure out a way to do it.
Okay, the village centennial celebration. Any ideas on what we should do or?
Yeah, I would like to have, again, involving the community in more things, establish a centennial celebration committee.
Well, maybe we could somehow through our survey identify people who would like to
Or
participate
just
in that.
make an announcement right
Right.
now.
Okay,
And put
Well,
an
we have to-
announcement to the community.
right, that we like people to come.
Come forward to
If they volunteer.
Go plan. It's April 14th, is it? Was the actual date?
Close enough.
14, 15, 16, something like that.
Is it, so do we
We don't
want
have to
something
do it
on that? Oh,
We don't
yeah,
have
I
to do
wouldn't
it on the
think,
day,
yeah.
but,
Okay.
around it. Yeah.
Okay,
So if we're going to have a survey coming out soon though,
Right.
would it be,
should we include that on the
because
survey?
that's one of the questions.
We could
What
have
would you
it,
like to
yeah,
be
we could
involved
do it,
in?
Yeah,
You could put that as a point, like.
right,
Yeah, we could just list one, an example.
right. I think we should put it on the survey.
Yeah.
Okay. And now can we do managers report?
Okay.
All right, let's see, under the category of administrative matters, we have, for contracts, we have contracts and agreements with all our current service providers, compiled in a notebook, which was started, before I got here. And we're gonna be
But not by much.
gradually reviewing them to assure adherence to best practices. Building permits and more technical building regulation questions have been on hold essentially while we're looking for a new building administrator. Mr. Matwally's been very patient. The good news is that we have 2 applicants for the building administrator vacancy who are very good. They are both have engineering backgrounds. They both have worked with many other municipalities. I've called all their references. We interviewed them. Richard and Bill were there for the interviews as well. The bottom line is I like them both, and I would be glad to work with either one of them. On balance, I guess I would vote for Doug Lohmeyer because of his more extensive experience with building regulations specifically. I think Bill Bissell's greatest strength is in water issues, drainage, and stormwater. And because of that, I'm leaning toward Doug.
So can we just take a motion on that? And
Any discussion?
who would, yeah. Well, let's get a motion in a second and then have just some discussion. Would somebody move to hire one of these guys? Yes, Doug Lohmeyer, or, okay,
Or to authorize the village manager to negotiate a contract.
perfect.
Yes. Sounds
That was it.
That's the wording we were
Yes.
looking for.
And is there a second? For
You were
that?
there at the meeting.
Oh, okay, I'll second it. Okay. Discussion.
What were your, you were, Bill, you were at the,
Yeah. Go ahead,
you were
Bill.
at the interview.
I really like Doug. First place, he was closer by, and I think would be more available on an ongoing basis. That was, and both of them are certainly competent. I mean, that wasn't, and I thought because Bissell also tacked on transportation because he lives in Virginia, that wider, his being further away was not encouraging. I felt we would get better service from Lohmeyer.
Well, it's a difference of 50% of the hourly charge.
Right.
So it works out to
adding in the
50%
travel?
more, yeah.
Adding in the travel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You were there, how'd you feel about that too?
Based on personalities, I like Bissell better, but that's not a basis for a vote.
So would you support Doug?
I'll support.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all those in favor of Doug?
Aye.
Opposed?
Good.
We're in
that's done.
favor of Tory
Right.
negotiating.
Really, whatever, Ron,
So,
yeah.
so
Okay.
on this case-by-case basis, you've authorized Tory to negotiate
Negotiate
and
a
sign the contract.
Okay,
I
perfect.
also want to point out that Bill Bissell is a great resource for us on stormwater and drainage issues.
Right.
And if that is a path you all want to go down in the future, Doug Lohmeyer is definitely competent in it as well, but I think he, in the process of this interview, made a
Right,
good
agreed.
contact.
But I think,
Agreed.
in some of these water issues that
And I would-
we've got to deal with, maybe somebody.
If you want anything from me on the contract, let me know.
Okay, moving on.
All right, contract with Ron Bolt. The happy news is that he is going to be creating his own firm.
Flying
and
solo.
so he has sent us a contract, which,
For less money.
for less money.
This is, I have to say that this is the second time Ron has changed ships, and each time it saved us money.
Right.
This is not a good trend.
No, the thing is, he gets to keep it all.
I was gonna say, but he keeps more each time, so it works
He
out.
gets
for both of
100%.
us.
Yeah, where can it go from here?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay,
In-house?
moving on.
Does this require a motion? Does this require a
A
motion?
motion to,
For Brown's contract?
Yeah, doesn't it?
yeah,
Okay,
Yeah.
is there
I'll
a
make that motion. We
second?
approve his contract.
aye,
Arthur, all in favor?
aye.
I oppose. Okay, moving on.
Okay, just in terms of staff in the office, as I made clear when I was interviewing, I'm gonna be out of the office for 3 weeks. And Devin Gallagher, who was the temp here, has offered to work in the village office on a temporary basis
For
during
the
that
3
time.
weeks.
July
And we've
1st.
approved that. There've been enough votes.
Devin.
Yeah, we've
Talking about
approved, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
Okay.
believe so. On
Yes, there
email
were the necessary
conversations.
votes, I'm sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Has anybody
Um,
communicated that
yeah.
to her?
Oh, does she,
This would be an example of how clear communication about who's responsible for what is going to be helpful to avoid dropping any balls.
yeah,
Yeah.
you tell her.
It was-
That's your job.
I will call her.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tori.
Just ask
Thought
him.
I would toss that out there. Thank
Okay, just an update on things. Financials been working with Dan Baden to get a new bank card and go through the insurance audit, and there's a big learning curve on all that, but we're making headway. Records retention and disposal schedule. Before we can throw anything out in the office, we need to have one. Devin and I drafted one with help from Ron, which is attached here, and it's going to need to be approved at a future council meeting before we can move forward. Website.
Is this considered a policy? Is our records retention policy?
Yes, but it's also required by state law.
Okay.
But you're right, it's a
The
policy.
state law says that nothing can be destroyed without having one of those.
Correct.
Which we've never had.
Yeah, with the absence of having one, it says you can't destroy any records.
Uh-huh,
The village's
Okay.
practice to date has been to keep everything.
everything,
Tell me.
yeah, okay.
Website. we've had some issues with the menu items taking up too much volume as a result. There were a lot of glitches, but we're working on that with Brian Rains. It is a bit of a time-consuming process. I think in the short term, we've got the things operating that need to operate, but in the long term, we're gonna have to go through systematically every single link, every single photo. That's gonna be a lot of staff time, but, and I think that actually is a great place for feedback from residents about what works, what doesn't, what they could use more of on the website. What's, Ted gave me great feedback actually earlier. We couldn't find the agenda without another link, so anyway. Village policies, this is related to the website. As Ron Bolt pointed out that so far we've got about 15 policies adopted by the council since 2007, which should all be on the website, and we just need to methodically go through and make sure they're up there.
Do we have a hard copy of those in the office now?
We have not found.
I'm not sure. We do. I just don't know where. And Ron has them if we don't. So.
But let me go back to the website again. Tiffany, you had said that there is a Google tool that you can use to see what people are using on the website.
Google Analytics, yeah.
Which we did pay for as part of our website refresh. And I understand one of the biggest things was just making sure that what we were asking for was coming to us, that it was not just going to, Brian or a single email address, because once that email address disappears, if you're not granted admin access, the analytics disappears. You have to redo your.
I'll follow up with Brian.
That would be really useful to see what people are actually looking at.
And that reminds me, Tori and I are working on updating the electronic version of the code. So before the RFP goes out for the compliance review, which links folks to the website, we got to make sure that code is up to date.
No slow rolling that, Ron Bolt.
Was there you never found an up-to-date version of the code in the office?
Well,
again, it may be
what's
here,
up
but
to
you
date?
don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, there's code in the office, and I think what needs, I can't look at a code and know by looking at it that it is
Up to date.
Well,
on the cover sheet, does it have the latest?
Yes, there should be an electronic version. As Tori notes, the last update was
2012. That's on the
Which is-
website.
yes, January 2012, and there had been, I think, 4 ordinances since then that need to be added to the electronic version.
Okay.
Safety and police, we covered that. There were door-to-door solicitors that were covered by police, but same principles apply. Streets, sidewalks, traffic issues. We've got some cracks that developed on some squares along Brookville Road. I think a to-do list is a more comprehensive sidewalk repair inventory and also potholes. And what I need to kind of get a sense of is what is the number of repairs that sort of makes sense to call somebody out on. I don't think it necessarily makes sense to call contractors out on one or two, just because they've got a truck full of asphalt or whatever.
It's not just the numbers, but it's the locations.
Exactly.
They're distributed around.
So this is all something I need to learn more about. But
And we have a proposal pending that would deal with some of the unevenness in the sidewalks.
yeah, some have already been ground down. Is that? I can
Somewhere
see
but
that.
Years ago, yeah,
It's
we
a
did that
It's a
before.
round solution.
But
Trees. are
I'm sure they'll be following up with you on that.
We got just on traffic issues, we got a resident on Taylor Street, talking about another resident routinely speeding and asked what could be done. I got a resident complaining that a store employee routinely parks on their street, asked what could be done. Street light outages, Wayne reported 5 to Petco. We've had
He just does
several-
that via his app on his phone.
Does he use his app? I'll ask him. There is an app.
Yeah.
We all can use our app to report
Yeah.
them, actually.
Yeah.
4 move-ins, move-outs. Sanitation, no major issues here. I think that's a regular source of phone calls to the office. And a lot of times there's misunderstandings, I'm discovering. I'm sort of learning all the rules with waste management. But for example, recycling materials have to be in recycling bins, if at all possible, because the drivers are under strict rules not to mix recycling with the waste stream. So if there's recycling in a plastic bag that looks like garbage, they're not going to pick it up. But then if the garbage guy looks at it and says, I think that's recycling, he's not going to pick it up. So this is why we help them by being very clear with them, by putting things in recycling bins or in a garbage bin. Another source of confusion, when our drivers are on vacation, which is going to happen in the summer, sometimes the substitute driver will do things a little differently. So for example, maybe the regular driver, because of the way he does it, gets to your house at maybe 9 or 10 in the morning. You don't really need to put your garbage out till like 8. But then the new driver comes and he does it a different way, and he gets there at 7 a.m. and garbage doesn't get picked up. And really, the garbage is always supposed to be out by 7 a.m. or the night before. This has been one issue. And then yard debris is just not ever supposed to be in the street. And what happens is contractors will come in sometimes and not know the rules. And residents can always, just remind contractors of that. And you can always call the office for extra paper bags. Trees, routine tree pruning continued in June and July. There was a tree on Bradley Lane cabled, as you all know. Some dangling tree limbs removed on Bradley and Raymond Street that were sort of unexpected. Some shrubs were treated. We really did not need to water in June. And, and we had bees in a sign, which our arborists, wasps, excuse me, which our arborist actually took care of because Wayne is on vacation. So he actually is a beekeeper.
As it turns out, that what's his name? Wolf. What's his name?
Paul
Wolf is a beekeeper. Who knew that?
And then also under the trees, I suppose you could say Wayne discovered tree protection was not installed during some construction going on in Delafield, but they were very responsive when we called them. Utilities, we had a power outage on Thornapple Street, June 28th. There was some listserv traffic on that. In WSSC, there was some brown water reported on, let's see.
A lot of places.
Yeah, Delafield, Quincy, and Taylor, and WSSC came out and opened hydrants adjacent to all those homes to clear the system. And then there was a driveway apron, shared driveway apron on Chestnut Street that was replaced because of a WSSC issue, which caused the traffic disruption. But no sewer issues, no gas issues, no newsletter this month, no community events, no snow. And that's that.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Okay, what, time for resident comments?
Any?
Yes, make the meeting shorter.
I'm going to try to make them short because the hour is late. Several things, though, at least briefly. First of all, I want to commend the council and the village manager on covering an awful lot of ground in a rather short period of time. I think there was an awful lot here. I also wanted to, because it was a bit of a surprise with respect to one aspect of the tree committee report, the proposal that the village subsidize trees, I think is a superb one, and I applaud everybody concerned on that. One thing that I noticed wasn't on the agenda, and not just because of the length of it, was the new street lighting. I just want to make sure, and I will probably mention it very briefly at every meeting where it's not discussed, that it needs to move forward sometime in the next year. And the final one, I did want to take at least an opportunity when it comes to the survey to make a couple of comments, because it seems that things are going to be moving forward pretty quickly maybe on that. One is a caution about those people who don't have computers or don't know how to use them well. There aren't a huge number of them, but they're important. And I think you will need to have, even though it's more resources, a paper version that people can use and then somebody can input it. And if you have to have volunteers input it, fine. The other thing, which I think is even more important with respect to the survey, is you can design a beautiful survey, and it sounds like the content is likely to be very good, and it will fail if you do not get it publicized. And the only way you're going to get it publicized well is not simply through the newsletter, not simply through the listserv, but by maybe having some people go out door to door and talk to their neighbors and get them to do it. And part of the thing is, you look around tonight, we had a discussion about the police function. We had a lot of people on the listserv complaining about not things happening, and nobody came. So, thank you.
And I wanted to add one other thing. As a resident, I want to thank Tiffany for the really hard work she did during this transition. She was in here many hours, working away. I won't say slaving away. It was all free will. But I do want to thank her for her efforts.
It wouldn't have gone as smoothly or seamlessly as thanks to her.
I had telephone calls in China at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Only after you emailed me. At 3 a.m. in the morning. Thank you very much. Didn't want to
Any other
interrupt.
comments? Motion to adjourn?
Yo!
Thank you.
Is y'all inappropriate?
Yeah.
All the recording.